The free agent shortstop class. Outside of Aaron Judge, these are arguably the best four players remaining in free agency are these four shortstops. And so I'm going to tell you who I think the Giants should sign next.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily San Francisco Giants podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked On Giants, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. My name is Ben Kaspick, and on the show we provide daily episodes Monday through Friday, talking about the San Francisco Giants in a way that's data-driven and rational, but also simple, passionate, and accessible to all. I'm a former contributor for the baseball statistics and analysis websites Beyond the Box Score and Rotographs. I've been podcasting about the Giants since 2015, and I'm a lifelong fan. Thank you for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get podcasts. And coming up on today's show, I have decided to undergo the challenge of sorting through these four free agent shortstops and making a recommendation in terms of which of these four I think the Giants should try to sign if they have the opportunity. And it was not easy. This is something, believe it or not, I've struggled with all offseason in terms of picking one of these guys. And actually, I've changed my mind from where I was when I first kind of was leaning towards Trea Turner. The shortstops in question are Trea Turner, Dansby Swanson, Xander Bogaerts, and Carlos Correa. They're all different, and they're all good. And I'm going to tell you who I think the Giants should pursue and what I think the contract will be and why. And for me, drum roll please, number one, the guy I'm recommending, I've come around. It's Carlos Correa, formerly of the Houston Astros and Minnesota Twins in 2022. So the reason, one of the main reasons I've ultimately landed on Carlos Correa as the one to recommend here, and we'll talk about second place and how it was a tough call, but it's the age. Carlos Correa is certainly the youngest among these four, and he's one of the youngest free agents out there at all. He is only 28 years old. He just turned 28 in late September, so he's barely 28 years old. And when you're talking about free agents, you're just often talking about guys who are 30, 31 years old. Aaron Judge, by way of example, is going to be 31 in year one of a deal. And so, by the way, this doesn't preclude anything about Aaron Judge. This is simply about the four shortstops. And the fact is, I think that even if you signed Aaron Judge, you would be probably wise to pursue one of these guys in addition. And let's just say, it's probably the most likely scenario that the Yankees bring back Aaron Judge. And in that case, I think the Giants, they don't need to come away with these four, but I would really like them to come away with, not all four of them, but one of these four. And so what would you be getting in Carlos Correa besides from the fact that he would be 28 years old in all of year one of a deal? Well, I've looked at this for all of these shortstops, and in terms of the wins above replacement per 600 plate appearances since 2020, it's kind of a mouthful, but part of the issue when I'm looking at this is 2020 wasn't a full season, and so when we just look at total wins above replacement since whatever year, it's skewed a little bit by the fact that 2020 wasn't a normal year. And so I want to look at 600 plate appearances is kind of the standard of a full season's worth of work. And so I'm saying, starting in 2020, the most recent 3 seasons, what do they do per full season of work, roughly, if they were healthy? Because if you're not healthy, this number kind of acts as if you were. And so we also need to look at playing time. How much did they actually play? Because if they're not staying on the field, that's a problem. But assuming full seasons of work, what kind of production were these guys putting up? And for Correa, he's come in at 4.8 Fangraphs wins above replacement per 600 plate appearances since the 2020 season. Very good. The others, he's roughly tied for second place, with Trea Turner actually being number one. Roughly tied with Xander Bogaerts, with Dansby Swanson coming in fourth place among these four. In terms of what is the weighted runs created plus, just all-encompassing offense since the 2020 season, Correa, again, roughly tied for second place with Xander Bogaerts, Trea Turner coming in first, Dansby Swanson coming in last. But, tied for second at 130 is still pretty darn good. And again, 100 is league average. And so 130 means he's been about 30% above average offensively since the start of the 2020 season. And in terms of playing time, this is a big one. What about plate appearances? How much has he actually played since the start of the 2020 season? And Correa comes in last. He comes in last among these four with 1,451 plate appearances. But, the guys with the most are like 1,613. It's actually a tie with Trea Turner and Dansby Swanson. So we are talking about 160 fewer plate appearances spanning 2020, 21, and 22. When I look at the playing time for Correa, he really hasn't missed that much time. It's just that these other guys have been really durable. He played 58 out of 60 games in 2020. He played 148 games in 2021, and he played 136 games in 2022. So only this year did he really miss somewhat significant time. That's really just like one IL stint, maybe. So it's not like he's missed a ton of time. So just because he's in last doesn't mean it's bad per se, but that is worth pointing out. In terms of outs above average, this is where things get really interesting because these types of numbers are like factored into wins above replacement defense. Not that FanGraphs wins above replacement actually doesn't use outs above average, but it uses defensive numbers. But what gets me about Correa is that he had 18th percentile outs above average in 2022, which is bad. It's not good. But when we look a little bit deeper, we will see that this was an outlier for him. Over the last several years, he was -3 outs above average this year, but the year prior, he was +12. The short season, he was +5. The year prior, +11, and the year before that, +20. So he has been a very good defender by outs above average many years, and then last year he wasn't. So the fact that he was 27 all of this season. So I don't look at Correa and look at one season's worth of a negative number here and say, that's it, he's a bad defender. I think defensive metrics, the kind of conventional wisdom around them is that we kind of need to look at more than one season and average in order to get a better picture of how is the defender. And also just if you watch Carlos Correa over the years, I mean, he has struck me as a very good defender. He has a cannon for an arm, which also would allow you to potentially play him at perhaps third base in the presence of Brandon Crawford on the roster, or second base, but third base with the arm, certainly that would play. And when we look at defensive runs saved, this year it was +3. Last year it was +20, and the year before that +7 in 2020, a short season, +7. So yeah, I'm averaging the last 3 years here when I look at this and overall seeing a good defender, not just looking at this year and seeing a bad defender. Where I kind of have some pause is when I look at the sprint speed, was only 45th percentile this year. Last year it was 48th percentile. In 2021, 61st percentile. In 2019, 66th percentile. So I am seeing some slowing down, which is kind of normal as guys go into their later 20s and early 30s. But I mean, he was just 27. It's not like he's late 20s at this point in time. But anyway, the main reason I'm recommending him here is because I think the defense rebounds and he's 28 years old. And these are contracts that you're going into for the long haul, right? He's not going to get a 2-year deal. We're talking, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years potentially for a lot of these players. And so you're in it for the long haul and you want someone who's just, I see, as good across the board, and you get a few extra prime years. And that's a big difference between Correa and some of these other guys. But it was close. And this next guy I'm going to recommend, really, I would be happy with any of these players. But the next two in particular, I would love to see them on the Giants. It's just that I gave the slight edge to Correa. So Trea Turner, we'll talk about him in just a minute. But before we do, the pains of wearing a dress shirt. I mean, this is very real for me. If you're watching on YouTube right now, you can see I'm wearing a comfortable, fuzzy sweater. And for me, it's all about comfort. And the dress shirt was due for a radical reinvention. And Roan stepped up to the challenge with Roan's commuter shirt. You're getting the most comfortable, breathable, and flexible shirt known to man, and here's why. Rhone's comfortable four-way stretch fabric provides breathability and flexibility that leaves you free to enjoy what life throws your way, from your commute to work to your 18 holes of golf. I mean, seriously, who wants to go from work in that uncomfortable dress shirt all day to then try to play some golf and you're wearing that stiff thing? You definitely need to change, but that's not true with Rhone. It's versatile and flexible for whatever life throws your way. The commuter shirt can get you through any workday and straight into whatever comes next. Head to rhone.com/lockedon and use promo code LOCKEDON to save 20% off your entire order. That's 20% off your entire order when you head to rhone.com/lockedon and use code LOCKEDON. It's time to find your corner office comfort. All right, as promised, the next shortstop on the list for me is none other than Trea Turner. And this is tough. These are all good players. They're all players who are going to get over $100 million. Like I said, you've got Judge, and then you've got these four. And when we're talking about position players, yes, the pitchers are also involved. Carlos Rodon is involved, and others, Jacob deGrom. But when we're talking about the best position players, I believe it's Judge and then these four. Nimmo's kind of in the mix as well, but I would be happy with any of these guys on the Giants, and they would help the Giants get back to the playoffs, which is, the first goal. Obviously, you want to win a World Series, but you got to get there first. Thanks again for making Locked On Giants your first listen today. For your second listen today, check out Locked On Sports Today. From the games that matter the most to the biggest stories in sports, go beyond the scoreboard and behind the scenes with local experts and insights only Locked On can provide. Locked On Sports Today, available on this app, YouTube, and wherever you get podcasts. So yes, the next player, and really, it's hard for me to make a call. I'm like kind of regretting I went with Correa, and I almost wish I went with Trea Turner. The big difference is the age. Like I said, Carlos Correa will be 28 in all of 2023, and Trea Turner is going to turn 30 midway through 2023. So you're getting somebody who is about almost 2 years younger, and that's a big deal. And with Turner in particular, so much of Turner's value, Trea Turner, comes from base running and defense and speed specifically. And speed is just simply not something that stays with you into your mid to late 30s, right? It is something that declines. As you get to around the age that he is now, you start to see some of that. And so with so much of his value, and he's such a good player, he's such an underrated player. He's literally been one of the very best players in baseball, like top 3 over the last handful of years, and even 5 years or so. Like, he's just been super good, super consistent. And like I said, I mean, how many people know that he, among these shortstop with Carlos Correa, with Xander Bogaerts, he is by far the one who has the highest weighted runs created plus since 2020 at 139. So the overall production, as measured by Fangraphs wins above replacement, has been for Turner per 600 plate appearances since 2020, 5.9. Carlos Correa, again, was at 4.8. So per 600 plate appearances, you've gotten, over the last 3 years, about a win more out of Trea Turner than you have out of Carlos Correa and Xander Bogaerts. And how does he do it? Well, like I said, the offense has been about 10 percentage points better than those two. And playing time is also a factor, with Trea Turner having played 1,613 plate appearances and Correa at 1,451. So he's been on the field more. I guess WAR per 600 plate appearances actually doesn't care about how many plate appearances you had. We're giving you 600 plate appearances. So that's a separate issue. The issue is that Turner has been very durable. When we look at playing time over the last 3 years, 59 games in 2020, 148 in 2021, 160 in 2022. He was 708 plate appearances this year with the Dodgers. As I said, 600 is kind of considered a full season, and he had 700. Sprint speed. This should surprise nobody. 99th percentile for Trea Turner. Outs above average, we saw in the NLDS, if you watched it, Trea Turner had some struggles defensively. So I'm kind of glad I saw that, because he, if you look at some of the numbers for Trea Turner defensively, you're not seeing the best kind of shortstop defense. This year, by outs above average, 0 at shortstop. The year before that, 1, +1. The year before that, -3. So if we're averaging those 3 years, we're seeing a guy who's average or a little below average at shortstop. If we look at defensive runs saved at shortstop, this year, -1. Last year, 1, +1, I mean. And the year before that, in the short season, -5 in a short season. So, yeah, I mean, the eye test kind of backed that up in the Giants versus Dodgers games I saw, and then in the NLDS, he wasn't the best shortstop I've ever seen, and certainly had some problems. So you talk about Crawford and perhaps signing a guy and then having them switch positions. I would love Trea Turner at second base. I think that, I worry about the declining speed, which is just an inevitability. It kind of declines sooner than a lot of other attributes, as far as I understand. So, but yeah, this year he was 99th percentile in sprint speed and 48th percentile in outs above average. I'm going to reiterate, Carlos Correa was only 18th percentile outs above average. So if that continued, that would be a problem, but I'm banking on kind of averaging the last 3 years. And when we average the last 3 years, Correa comes out ahead of Trea Turner. So, in conclusion, because so much of Trea Turner's value is tied to speed, I have recommended him here second, and he is also older by almost 2 years versus Carlos Correa. And that's if they were the same age, I would probably recommend Trea Turner ahead of Correa. And also there's like the personality stuff, right? And the cheating stuff with the Astros. Did just want to mention with Correa, Pete Putila is the new Giants general manager, and he was in Houston for Carlos Correa's whole time there. And so I've seen photos of the two of them chatting on the field. And so there's obviously a relationship there. And I think that could perhaps play an influence in Correa wanting to come to the Giants, or being willing to come to the Giants, being more willing than he might otherwise be. And also by signing with the Twins, and also some of the comments he made after signing that deal with the Twins, not a team that people saw as a at all likely destination for Correa last year, signed this 3-year deal with opt-outs after every year, and he's going to opt out, and that's how he'll be a free agent again. But he made it clear he's willing to go wherever they pay him. And so this is not always true. Sometimes players just don't want to play for the Giants, but it seems like if the Giants made him the best offer, he would take it. So that also opens up the door for that opportunity. In terms of what the contract will be, I think I said I was going to tell you. I don't want to have to guess, because it really, what we're going to do as the offseason continues, different sources, MLB trade rumors, ESPN, Fangraphs, and even others are going to come out with predictions for what the contracts will be for the top players in free agency. They usually do top 50, and we are going to literally look through all of them. What I like to do is write them all down and average them among the different sources, and then use that to kind of give an estimate for the for what it's going to be. So we will get to that. That's going to happen soon. These sources are going to put that out either like before the World Series ends or just after. And so we will do that at that time. But for now, they're going to get big contracts. The years are kind of what's hard to predict. They're going to get at least $25 to $30+ million per year over many years is what's going to happen with all these guys. So anyway, coming up in just a minute, I'm going to turn my attention to, for me, the next guy who makes a lot of sense, and then why one of these players is not my favorite, despite the fact that they're really good, and even that they might address the Giants' most acute concerns the best, and yet I'm recommending them last. So we'll explain that in just a minute. But first, all right, as promised, we're going to move on to recommendation number 3. I want to reiterate, I think that the Giants landing any of these guys would improve them rather dramatically, and that it would be great. But if we had to pick, because I don't see them getting more than one of these guys, just getting one would be a big deal, a very big deal. Each one is going to get $100+ million, maybe in some cases $200+ million. And yeah, so the Giants have never come close to landing a player like this under this front office. But the third player I'm recommending is Xander Bogaerts. So like Correa, there's an opt-out. So it's not 100% guaranteed that he becomes a free agent. Opt-out decisions are due like right after the World Series, I think within a couple days. And So Rodon will have to make that call, Correa and Bogaerts as well. For Correa, he'd be opting out of, 2 years and like $67 million. And for Xander Bogaerts, he'd be opting out of, I don't have it written down. I think it's 3 years, $60 million. So another factor, just like with Trea Turner, the first thing I'm mentioning here is age. And Xander Bogaerts is 30 years old. He just turned 30 a month ago on October 1st. And so he would be playing next year in his age 30 season. So he's a little bit older than Trea Turner. Trea Turner plays part of next year at 29. Bogaerts plays all of next year at 30. So, however, what I like about Xander Bogaerts, like I said, he's kind of tied with Carlos Correa in terms of FanGraphs wins above replacement per 600 plate appearances over the last 3 years. How does he do it? Well, he hits. He hits as well as Carlos Correa. In different ways, Xander Bogaerts is like a guy who's always hit for a high average. His career batting average is .292, which is really high. The impossible standard of like 300 is what makes a good batting average. It's not true anymore. League average is like .240, even with DHs. When we had pitchers, it was even better than that hitting, but it just keeps going down, and league average batting average is around .240. So if you're .250, .260, that's good. Okay, so we need to adjust our thinking on that. And his career on base is .356. Doesn't hit for a ton of power. That is like one concern I have, and probably the biggest reason I have him number 3 is that, he only hit 15 home runs this season despite playing a lot. He played 150 games, 631 plate appearances. So I think Fenway Park has helped him, but the dude can hit. He's just a pure hitter. And then when we look at defense, well, actually, let me just go through my numbers here. Number of plate appearances, he's only at 1459, so about the same as Carlos Correa. So he's been off the field at times over the last 3 years. Played 56 games in 2020, 144 in 2021, and 150 in 2022. As we can see, these are plenty durable players, but just slightly less so than Trea Turner, and as we'll see, Dansby Swanson. Sprint speed for Xander Bogaerts. He's not a guy I've thought of as a fast guy or a good defender even, but this year, by the way, these are sprint speeds and outs above average from just this year when we're talking about percentiles. 64th percentile sprint speed and 89th percentile outs above average. When we look at the actual physical numbers for defense in terms of the best kind of numbers we have for defense, he was +5 outs above average this year, but again, averaging 3 years, which maybe I should do in my spreadsheet. He was -7 in 2021 outs above average and -3 outs above average in 2020. And even just going back another year, -9. And so this year was an outlier where he did well. And when we look at defensive runs saved, he was +4 this year, but then -5 the year before, -4 the year before that, -9 the year before that. So a consistent track record of negative shortstop defense until this year. And so I do average. I'm not just being fooled and saying he changed and he's better. Maybe he did. Maybe there's evidence he did some things differently, got some new instruction or something. But I'm looking at those negative years and saying I believe that will show up, especially if you're talking about a 6-year deal, right? It's probably going to end up being negative again next year and then only get worse as the contract goes on. So while I like the bat, I like the player a lot. Again, I would be happy with any of these guys. He is coming in third for those reasons. So the number 4 guy for me is Dansby Swanson, despite the fact that he comes in not just among these 4, but overall at 100th percentile outs above average in 2022. So when we're talking about the Giants, a team that needs defense, how come I'm saying that this player is 4th among my recommendations here? And maybe I'm dumb for putting him 4th. Maybe he should be number 1. But the reason I have him number 4 is simply because I don't know if I fully believe in the bat. And while I like the player, he's a defense-first player. He has been better offensively the last few years. He is going to be entering his age 29 season. He turns 29 in February, so he'll be 29 in all of year 1 of a deal. Maybe I should have him third now that I think about this, but I'm sticking with it. He's fourth for now. In terms of wins above replacement per Fangraphs per 600 plate appearances since 2020, he's last among these four at 4.5, which is still really good. An average player is going to give you about 2 wins above replacement per 600 plate appearances. So all of these guys way better than average, hence the multi-hundreds, $100+ million deals they're going to get. But weighted runs created plus since 2020, just 109 for Dansby Swanson, which is closer to average by far than any of these other players. And that's where I have concerns. If you're going to invest all this money and you end up getting a bat that's maybe average, I'm just not sure that's what you want to do. In terms of playing time, he plays a lot. He's tied with Trea Turner in terms of plate appearances since 2020. He in 2020 played in 60 games, all of them. In 2021, 160 games. And in 2022, 162 games. So, I mean, he literally missed 2 games over the last 3 years. 2 games. So he is Mr. Ironman, at least he has been the last few years. And the sprint speed was 79th percentile and outs above average, like I said, 100th percentile. When we look at averaging the last few years for defense, he was plus 20 outs above average this year, plus 3 in 2021, and plus 6 in 2020, plus 9 defensive runs saved this year, negative 7 in 2021, but plus 9 again in 2020 in a short year. Again, putting up 9 in a short season is impressive. So when I average those, I'm seeing a guy who's a good defender, no doubt, at shortstop. But again, part of the issue is that Crawford exists, and Crawford is kind of similar in that I'm not sure about the bat, but I think you're going to get pretty good defense there. And so do you want 2 of these guys who play the same position? That is a big part of the issue, is they don't really have a vacancy right now at shortstop. Yes, you can move Crawford, but then again, you have 2 guys who are like defense-oriented players, and maybe you're not getting great production with the bats. Whereas with these other shortstops, you're getting really good offense. In addition to, in some cases, I think you're getting good defense. Not as good, but still like at least average, maybe better. As specifically with Correa, I think you're going to get above average defense, and you're getting significantly above average bat. A guy who has a history of succeeding in the playoffs, doesn't strike out a lot. I didn't mention strikeout rates. A lot of these guys don't strike out a lot. In fact, it's kind of a hallmark of all 3 is that they make a lot of contact. Yeah, I mean, we're talking below average strikeout rates across the board. So I like all of these players, but that's my order. Tell me what you think your order is on Twitter in the comments below. That is all the time we have for today. Thanks again for making Locked On Giants your first listen. For your next listen, check out the Locked On Sports Today podcast. The biggest stories of the day, plus instant reactions, big game recaps, and the take of the day. Available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, and wherever you get podcasts. Once again, my name is Ben Kaspick. Check me out on Twitter at Ben Kaspick, Kaspick. If you like this show, please consider rating it or leaving a review. Helps me out a lot, so thanks in advance, and thanks to everyone who's done so already. Can't wait to be with you again tomorrow. Thanks again for listening. You are now Locked On Giants.